Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Lancaster, and I'm with Red Hat. Been part of the Cloud Platforms business unit and part of Red Hat for 5 years now, and I am your moderator today for the Telco panel. And we've got some guests with us today, and I'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves.
Hi, so my name is Guillaume Prometheus. I lead a research and development team at Optus, which is an Australian telco. And our focus is mostly on new product innovation across our network and IT.
Hello, my name is Vasily Chekalkin. I'm principal software architect in Optus. I'm working with Guillaume. And I'm hands-on architect, developer. I'm making sure that architecture is buildable, deployable, and operational at scale.
I'm Paul Fischer. I work at Bell Canada. It's a large telco in Canada. I'm an infrastructure architect there, and I'm on the IT side managing all their OpenShift deployments.
Okay, thank you. So, a few questions today. I'm looking for a lot of your experiences on how you're using OpenShift and Kubernetes within your companies. What I'd like to start off with is maybe you can talk a little bit about how the line between the IT side of your business and the network side of your business is sort of blurring at this point, and how they're coming together and how they're both sort of leveraging containers and Kubernetes and OpenShift.
So I'll start. Sure. So what we're seeing is a lot of practices are starting to converge between network and IT. Mm-hmm. And so interestingly, for so many years, network and IT, and I think it's quite common towards the telcos, have been running in parallel with different experience, different culture, different focuses. And as we grow, we see that the software that we run on both ends are looking very similar. And so there is this very interesting opportunity now to converge the two, mm-hmm. But also to reconsider in terms of culture, what is the best pieces we can take from whether it's IT systems or network systems. And a good example of this is network systems of this insane level of operation at scale. Right. And bringing that practice into IT and vice versa.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah, so, I mean, one of the biggest convergences I've seen is like Bell Canada is currently very involved in the ONAP.
ONAP project.
The ONAP project, mm-hmm. Which is a lot of stuff, which you could almost look at that as somewhat of a back-end IT system. And that's currently controlled by network right now, but it's the same type of platforms and stuff they're doing on that, although they're not running on OpenShift, but it's all on Kubernetes. And right. It's the same as what's actually happening in sort of IT. So the one thing that is sort of spreading across the organization, doesn't matter if you're network or if you're in IT, is just the containerization of everything. Right. And it is different, like not everyone's running like a platform base, but it's just spread like wildfire across the organization. So that's something where, when you start looking at it, like the architecture, it looks very similar, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like, okay, well, we're doing the same things. We can actually start leveraging and collaborating a lot more than what it used to look like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Vasily, do you?
Yeah, I probably can add to all these conversions. We started with containers on networks, and then we moved to IT. And it's actually showing you different sides of the story, how network people think versus how IT people think. And yes, it's big cultural shift. So we bringing best of the both worlds, and actually OpenShift showing like different things to different people, and we still can use common platform, common tools, common set of practices of development, deploying, operating things. And it's exciting. It's actually exciting. We're merging network and IT now.
Okay, okay. So just like to follow up on that thing that you mentioned, because that's a little uncommon what you mentioned, starting with containers on the network side. But so one of the things that we're hearing a lot about today in telco, especially in the sort of post virtualized world, because we know that a lot of folks have delivered virtualized network functions. Mm. Sort of the next layer of that we see is the idea of the containerized network function. Mm. And maybe you guys can give a little bit of your experience or talk a little bit about how you're approaching that, or whether you have it in your labs today or if you're somewhat using it within your networks.
From our perspective, I think we had a story of software engineers moving into network, and the culture in a team inevitably was cloud native, meaning that you want to build a system, you want to write the configuration on how it should be deployed, how you're going to configure it, etc. And so in network, it was obvious very quickly for us that containers, as we were prototyping new systems, were the easy way for us to get started. And when we got started and got a prototype and started productionizing it, we wouldn't go back. And so today we've got CNFs running in the labs, obviously, for prototyping, but also in production. We found this is a great way to operate. And it gives a different meaning to Docker, particularly to our operations team, where they really start understanding why Docker and see the benefits of it as well.
And are they comfortable with that? Or are they becoming comfortable with it?
Look, I think the operation people were the most excited about it because there was a level of innovation that you don't see as much in this space. And also, when we have more of a DevOps approach to what we do, it means that things like metrics, for instance, the fact that as developers, we're going to write metrics at the same time as we're going to write code, that gives that level of confidence to the operation guys that started letting us and give us more control of our infrastructure because they saw that we had the right practice.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah, I would say that it's a little farther behind than where it maybe should be. The thing with the CNF stuff, I mean, primarily if you look at Bell, they're like we're basically an operator of other people's software, right? I mean, we have some engineering, and if you do, there is pockets within Bell where people are developing the software themselves and doing sort of similar things that Optus does. But for us, when you operate other people's software, you're kind of you have to wait until they actually containerize their stuff and give it to you. And what I found when I was working with that is they would take a big, huge piece of software and stick it in a container that was very large and go, here you go, run that. And that's not really how you want to run this stuff on a distributed platform. You really kind of need to make it more cloud native and split the control plane, the data planes up. The data plane is also a large problem right now. Accelerating the data plane in the container side is I would say not exactly mature yet. I mean, there's a lot of solutions out there that you can use, but when I was playing with that stuff, it was far from production ready, from an operations perspective. So.
Right. So a follow up on that question, right? One of the things we hear about is the whole idea of control and user plane separation. Are you working with some of your vendors, some of the key strategic ISVs or NEPs that you work with to sort of get that vision from them and get them to build those for you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but we're a large telco in Canada, but we're small. Pushing the big vendors to do this stuff I think inevitably they know it's coming. I mean, it's not everything's going to stay in a VNF, I don't think. I mean, some stuff maybe, but there's other stuff that just makes sense to pull apart. And control plane functions actually work fairly well because they don't have to do that massive push through the data plane. But so containerizing those is actually not like such a huge deal. It's the other parts of it that are challenging. So I think they've heard us, we've yelled about it, and said this is sort of where we need to go. And I think, but it's basically trying to develop that and I don't think it's a super easy problem to take something that's and distribute the load across and containerize it also.
Okay. Would you guys like to take a swing at that one, or where you guys are in your journey?
So we started this journey by creating application servers, so you can think of it as add-ons into our network. And it was a good opportunity for us to kind of say, oh, we're going to virtualize this end-to-end. And the friction was very much between the existing network function and this whole world, which may look like a black box at first, but has huge potential. And the idea of putting a new layer of a virtualized network underneath, etc. But you can always start anywhere in a network. We've started probably with the most complex functions, by taking the MRFs, but you can take components around the HSS, or you can take small functions of your network, start containerizing them, and run them in parallel to other functions. So you don't necessarily need to go through a full transformation to get started. And as you have a first CNF out there, and you can build your operation model around it, get the experience, and start growing from that point. Effectively, with vendors or equipment, et cetera, it can be difficult because their roadmaps might not always align with what we're trying to do. But again, you can work in isolation for specific pieces.
Okay, okay. So just let's stay on the idea of CNF a little bit. One of the things, Paul, that you mentioned was maturity, and perhaps maybe you guys could elaborate a little bit about what you'd like to see from the community, because I mean, this is a community event where you've got a lot of attention out there on things that may be adjacent to Kubernetes, for instance, where things like the multis functions that you guys need might be need to improve. So this is your opportunity to sort of give us some feedback around that.
Yeah, I can jump on the technical side. So, a couple of years ago, when we developing our first MRF, and I'm coming from IT side, I had no idea about networks. No one told me that it's impossible to implement containerized MRF function, yada, yada, yada. So I just implemented it. And for deploying from within container, we did some interesting hacks, like dropping to host network, because we've got different network interfaces for signaling and for media, as probably most telcos do. So we are binding from within container to particular host network interface and doing some awful and terrible things that no one should do. But because Maltas wasn't matured to be deployed, and now, like from architecture point of view, I'm kind of stuck because now I'm having legacy. I've got my functional MRF with old approach on stuff. Instead of like leaning on community and getting Maltas on board and getting separate control plane and allocating IPs directly from VMware stack or whatever. So I probably would love to have help from community saying, Vasily, you're doing it totally wrong. You should go this way and just don't think about this horrible past. But again, like in my operational head, I can't just change architecture easily on actual production network. So it's always trade-off between how fast you can progress on things and how fast you can adopt to things past point of production deployment. And migration paths will help, probably not only us, for everyone saying, okay, like community driven and Red Hat baked migration paths and waypoints into the future, how actual MRF, not only MRFs, how actual things should be done. Best practices, like Red Hat architecture for AWS, how you deploy things by default.
For a control plane?
For control plane, for data plane, and data plane in Telco is complex thing, unfortunately.
Sure. Interestingly on this, when we started with OpenShift in network, we didn't even know about NFV, and sorry about that. It was like just building software in network, that seems to be the right way to do it. And the idea of Kubernetes for this whole big concept of NFV was like, no, guys, use software, guys. Just move on. It's
okay.
NFV.
Just skip the VM.
I'll say, okay, well, we just got to deliver what we're doing, and it just sounds right. It just works.
Yeah.
And now when we look at it today, and then we have those conversations about CNFs being run on Kubernetes and OpenShift, and it seems to be the way people do it.
Right.
It's interesting. So effectively, sometimes we got to take bets. And start somewhere, create legacy if you have to. But effectively, there's taking the risk there. 2 years ago, saying Kubernetes in network, people say it's not carrier grade. I think today this mentality is shifting. And,
right.
And when you talk about self-healing or the configurations you can put around your clusters, the benefits are really, the promise of an FV and the effective implementation of Kubernetes in network, effectively you can see that you can deliver those benefits with these solutions. So there's no problems with taking risk.
Right. I mean, I think we've seen that, virtualized functions running SRIOV are at least, delivered today and are, running in production. Sort of the next vision of that is moving into containers. So what you guys are effectively telling the community is that we need more work around things like Multis, but we also need more of a path on how to get there. Is that correct?
I mean, so Multis and so when you're doing CNS or VNS, you're going to need multiple interfaces. Where Multis and the CNI Genie are on the same sort of path as like using multiple CNIs within Kubernetes. It's some cool stuff, but to me, when we're talking about bypassing the data plane for SROV or OVS DPDK, all that kind of stuff, VPP, why don't we put work into speeding up the Linux kernel, right? Because that's usually the bottleneck. That's why you're trying to bypass that in the first place, because you can't run it through the kernel because you have some limitations there. And there's like the Cilium project is trying to do that, and they can get up to certain amounts of speeds, like 10 plus gigs or whatever. It's like, well, we need to push it to 25, 50, 100. Yeah. And the thing I don't like about the data plane acceleration stuff is most of them rip the Linux IP stack out. And that's like from an operator. I mean, I guess I'm biased because I've been doing Linux for a very long time. But when I feel like I'm in the dark when you do that, so now you've pulled all the tools that I use that are out there as the community that we've used for years. They're now no longer there, and I have to use a whole new tool set because the IP stack's gone. Right? It's something else. So that's to me is just a really abrasive way to do that. And I mean, I guess if it's the only way right now, we can do that way, but I would rather see it that we actually get some of the acceleration going through Linux properly.
Fortunately, we do some work around Linux, I've heard, here at Red Hat.
Yes, Red Hat does that, I think.
Okay, so maybe we'll get on to the next thing. Automation of application deployment. One of the things that we have going on here at OpenShift Commons is, of course, the operator workshop, which is next door. Try to encourage everyone to stop by if they have a chance. But maybe you guys can talk a little bit about how the automation of applications using operators is a concept that you guys are thinking about or perhaps even using at your company.
Right, maybe I can take the first part and you take the second one. So, operators is great for us because as we work with third party, whether it's Kafka or we deploy Kafka, deploy Ceph, we've got this simple ways of deploying these projects as they come as standard, almost off the shelf. Mm-hmm. But then on the next end, on the new systems that we build, I think if you, Vasily, want to talk about this, is the maturity of our systems to fit into the operator model in some iterative development process.
Yeah, so we're heavily using operators for production deployments, for testing, for development. Latest one was Istio, which no one wants to deploy by hand. Just don't even think about it. And we are using it for encryption in transit, like as go-to solution. For our own software, we started journey to operator world. First, we making sure that we've got every config, every template, every deployment, everything is properly committed, templated. We have reproducible builds, reproducible deployments, reproducible CI/CD. And at this point of time, we got it sorted out. Okay? So next step will be actually use operator as a last step to generate all this stuff instead of some handcrafted templated system. It took us some time, but it took some time for operators SDK to mature as well. So now I think it's one of the best point of time for us to start using operators to deploy our own software and our own solutions.
Okay.
So soon.
All right. Paul?
Yeah, we're using them. Basically the OpenShift platforms in IT are all multi-tenant. So we use that as we use the Prometheus operator to give all the application groups their own metrics and stuff. I mean, what I really like about it is, and me being selfish, is just the admin functionality, right? I can see what's going on. I can actually publish or subscribe what I want the end user to kind of see, and it's a powerful thing. And the fact that it can keep itself updated and all that, it's the right way to go, right? It's basically like Kubernetes for applications in some ways, with the control loop constantly running to update itself and look at where its state is. It's great. It's good to see some of the slides that they were doing. I haven't looked at operator.io in a bit, but it seems to be expanding a lot, which is really good to see, because when I first looked at it, they had Prometheus and etcd, and that was like it. So
yeah, I think we have a vision for growing Operator Hub a lot this year.
Yeah,
and,
good.
I mean,
Great.
we've pushed a lot of our ecosystem to actually add to it. You've probably seen some growth there this year, but we expect to ramp that up quite a bit. So,
Right.
Feedback from you guys is always wanted on that, by the way. So let's see, a few more questions. I guess from an operational perspective, what are the most important things when you guys considered, operating Kubernetes or OpenShift platforms inside of your network?
From a network perspective, maybe you can talk about this.
I can talk from application perspective. I'm all dev and I'm also ops, so I'm looking at my software, how it's deploying. So visibility was one of the most important things. I know how my software runs, where it runs, and it's operatable. So I can scale it up, scale it down, deploy a new version, and it helps a lot. It helps to maintain health of your systems. On another hand, it took us it's learning curve, how you change your software development, how you change your development practices. The full SDLC was adjusted for deploying your software on OpenShift. Like right now we have Prometheus metrics as basic requirement for your software. When you design it, you start with what metrics I will have. You start with health checks because it's it's requirement for self-healing functionality. You need to know that your application has like live database connection, so it's all good. So it's learning curve. You need to learn how to adjust your development for deploying in fully containerized, fully virtualized environment, and what handles you have to expose. So, and yeah,
OpenShift doesn't come out of the box as this magic platform that self-heal, etc. You actually have to learn and, as Vasily was saying, learn and then tweak it to what does self-healing means? What is the strategy when something goes wrong?
Right.
So yes, it can be magic, but it's not out of the box. So when we actually need to define this as engineers and tweak those systems to work efficiently.
Same for scaling, auto-scaling solutions for your workloads, where you put them, how you tag how you label your applications and nodes, etc., etc. It's a long way.
And integrating back into our traditional NOC operation centers, which are alarm-driven, and having not sending 650 red alarms to their screens, but do this very efficiently. So there's a lot of work into operationalizing these clusters.
Yeah, I think it's work on both sides, like work from the sysadmins that kind of manage it in the background, but also work for the application developers too, and especially if they don't know, like a lot of the groups that we're onboarding in IT don't necessarily, they've never done containers at all before, so they're used to like SSHing into the container to look, and it's like, well, where are my logs? What's going on here? So that's kind of like a hurdle they have to go. And then on the admin side, it was, I would say, I mean, we started with 3.6, we did 3.6, 3.9, 3.10, and now we're at 3.11. And 3.11 for us was like a light year jump because they integrated Tectonic into the back. So now I can see the whole from cluster wide what's actually going on, and managing capacity and quotas and all that kind of stuff at a cluster level is like really, really helpful. Instead of sort of hacking it together with like scripts and Ansible and stuff like that. So that's what we were doing before. So it's that kind of visibility is really important if you want to run it in an operations shop. Like you just need that. It's table stakes really.
Okay. So one last question, because we're coming to the end of our time here, but how, operators aren't necessarily known as the most cutting edge. So let's talk a little bit about how you guys are changing that culture. What you guys are doing to make it more innovative inside of your own shops.
The operators or the overall?
How the use of OpenShift and Kubernetes and containers is impacting, let's say, a cultural change, or is it impacting a cultural change within the operations within your companies?
I think sometimes you have to push the boundaries.
Yeah.
If you do not adopt these technologies early, you will create legacy essentially. So we have been using cutting edge. A few of them, and it paid off. You just got to make the right decision on which community you kind of going to choose. That mentality shift, I think, is being set by not screwing up in terms of, and it is possible. It is possible to embrace something that's cutting edge. You have to understand the boundaries around it and know, most importantly, when this is going to fail. Is this on a critical path or not? And how do we explain that to our operation people? But if you think of when we started with Kubernetes, before we worked with Red Hat, there was no enterprise support, etc. So we were already doing this, and then the enterprise support started coming in as we were scaling. So we can do this with other projects that we can see. It's quite easy to see a project that's getting a lot of traction, and then carry on. If we want to deliver the best optimized system, we have to stay ahead of the curve in a way.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah, I would say that it's actually not really the containerization or the Kubernetes side, but it's the CI/CD kind of chains in the background, the pipelines that really drive the speed of deployment of software. So, because that's all, I mean, it kind of comes part and parcel, like you deploy this stuff and then, well, how do I actually integrate with it? How do I talk to it? Well, you need to go through some sort of CI chain. And once you start doing that, once the developers overcome that hurdle and learn how to do that, it like sells itself. Yeah. Because it's so much faster and you know, you can integrate like testing in there and it's so much more sort of foolproof, and it's all driven by code. So it's a lot better than what we used to do, which is, you know, like waterfall project management stuff.
Right.
Everybody in a meeting room, you know, all that kind of stuff is just, so once you deploy these platforms and developers start to get used to it, it's just, you start seeing like just projects spawn like all over the place. Like, wow, look at these guys use this, right? And so they just keep asking for more quota space from us.
I mean, to that end, are the business side of the companies, are they sort of seeing opportunities to create new and, you know, let's say, quickly create new services as a result of that? Is that part of the cultural change there?
I think so. I don't know if the business side is well. First of all, the business side doesn't care what the technology is running on. It's just about the speed of delivery of the project or whatever service we're offering. That's changed, right? So we can offer these things just so much faster than to, you know, hey, we need this to be running on, you know, Kubernetes or OpenShift or whatever. So, and that's sort of where I think you're getting your advantage there. But
okay.
I think you win the culture change with when you can display the benefits. One thing that we did was to start obviously having a test-driven approach to what we were doing and deploying end-to-end with actual cell phones connected in Faraday cages and end-to-end testing connected to a CI/CD pipeline. When people started seeing this and so, oh, so you can change something and have an end-to-end test run 20 minutes after and have a full result of what this would do on a network, that's a chance of displaying a benefit, and then that would encourage people to back this up. And you rarely get, once you get to that benefit point, you rarely get people skeptical about the risks.
Okay. All right, well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.